This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. This is a finance show for small business owners about money, how it works in our business and personal lives, and how we can build wealth to be financially independent. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and today I have a special guest, a dear friend of mine on the podcast, and I've asked my buddy Clay to come on to the show and answer some questions concerning buying cars. So let me tell you a little bit about Clay. Clay's last name is McGee. Clay and I met, Clay, it's been probably 14, 15 years ago. Is that about right?
Every bit of it, at least.
So we've known each other for a while. We've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. We've lived life together a couple of times. So I asked Clay to come onto the show, guys, because Clay works in the automobile industry, but more importantly, he deals with the financing side of car buying. What's your exact title, Clay?
I'm the finance director for Rusty Wallace Kia in Alcoa.
So Rusty Wallace Kia. Rusty Wallace is a name that I recognize. Wasn't he a race car driver for a while?
He's a Hall of Fame race car driver at NASCAR. That's correct. He owns 8 dealerships.
He owns 8 different dealerships, and you work for the Kia dealership.
I do.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been 6 years in the car business as finance manager the entire time. Prior to that, since 1992, I have been doing something in the finance world. I've worked for 3 different companies, American General, Washington Mutual Bank, and then for Rusty Wallace. So that's the only 3 jobs I've ever had, and they've all been in finance.
Now, Clay, your accent's a little different than mine. I've got a South Georgia accent. We live in East Tennessee where they talk a little funny, but you've got a different accent. What's that accent?
I do get questions all the time. It's usually, you ain't from around here, are you, boy? So, no, I grew up on the Mississippi-Louisiana line in Tylertown, Mississippi. And so it's a little bit of redneck, and it's got a little faster speed to it because it's got a little Cajun involved in it. So I'm from Tylertown, Mississippi, small dairy community.
Small dairy community. And you've been in Knoxville for about 15, 16, 17 years now, right?
I have moved here November 2002.
And married and children, correct?
I am. My wife and I have been married 25 years. We have 1 daughter who is a paralegal at a local law firm here, and I'm real proud of her. They're both keepers.
Yeah, I hear you. So let's jump into this car buying question. Clay, can you start this thing off by, and it may take a few minutes for us to go through this first question, and I'll pull you back if we get a little off topic, but explain to me the car buying process from start to finish as easy as possible.
The car buying experience really doesn't have to be complicated. However, it is complicated. The thing that you really need to start with, if you're going to start the car buying process, the best thing to do is to go ahead and establish a budget first. Know that before you get to the dealership.
Are you talking about a max budget? Because I know the way sales guys can go.
No, yeah, because I promise you in the car business, we're going to ask you what you want to pay. And then we're going to say up to. Okay. And then we're going to say with a max of. We're trying to identify where you want to be at. So if you know that in advance, it's really very helpful. And then know what kind of car you want to buy. Do you have 6 children? If you do, you don't need to be looking at 4-door sedans. You got 1 child who's fixing to go to college. Well, you don't need a van, more than likely. So there are certain things you just know about your car. Your budget is important, what kind of car you're looking at, and then what kind of equipment. Do you care to have automatic windows? You want to crank down the window. Identify those needs first. Then, of course, you're going to come on the lot. You're going to drive a car. You're going to identify a car you want. You're going to commit to look at numbers on that particular vehicle. Once you've gotten numbers and they're agreeable to you and to the dealership, they'll start doing the paperwork. And then, of course, comes in the finance side. And that's where you're going to go to the finance office and talk about your different options that you have. Once you're through with that and you've decided what you want to do, you'll sign your life away for the next some odd many years. And then back out to get your car and go home. So it doesn't have to be terribly complicated, but there are a lot of moving parts in all of that as well.
So let's dissect this process a little bit. I'm actually working with a couple of clients right now who are trying to buy vehicles. And the number one complaint I hear about the car industry is that, and I got to be honest, I've never bought a car from a dealer. So I'm a little unusual. I've always bought used cars and I sweat, I roll, but I've had many friends and family and clients that do this, and they walk onto the car dealership. They know kind of what they want to pay every month, and they may have a budget of $300, $400, $500 a month, or they may know, hey, look, I don't want to pay any more than $40,000 cash for a deal. I've got some clients that do that. Right. Mm-hmm. And they walk on the dealership, and they have this want. They know what they want, and they kind of know what they need. But before they know it, they're talking with some slick salesperson who's trying to talk them into a bigger vehicle than maybe they anticipated. How can clients control, or how can they avoid being pushed or pressured into looking at something that maybe they don't want to look at?
That is probably the reason I brought up knowing your budget before you walk on the lot first. One of the things that is not only frustrating for the customer, but it's also frustrating from a sales side, is that when you get a customer and you take them through the candy store, we call it.
Right, yeah.
So you're going to walk across a lot with 400 cars on it. If you don't know what you're wanting, you're going to end up saying, I like this, I like that, and you're going to get more and more and more and more money as you go across the line. But if you know where you're at and where you need to be at, then an experienced salesman will take you to that range, try to keep you in that range, because we want to sell you a car. We don't want to have you get into a position where you are coming here for a $400 payment. We've sold you a car that's $600, and by the time you're done, you're embarrassed to say, no, I'm not paying any more than $400, and you go get in your car and leave, as opposed to say, no, I really needed to be at the $400. So that's embarrassing for us. It's a waste of time for the car salesman and for the customer. It infuriates customers. Yeah. And so we have tried to get away from that. It's not easy, but if you identify where your budget's at, make sure your salesman knows as soon as you walk on the lot where you're trying to be at, and that that's where you need to be, then a good experienced salesman is going to keep you there. Now, you might get somebody that's been there 3 weeks and the sales manager's put a bonus on the most expensive car on the lot, and he's going to take you straight to that car lot. We've got a $300 bonus on this car. He wants to sell you that car. So that's why I say identify what you want before you get there.
Let's assume for the conversation that I understand my budget, and I'm now talking with the sales individual to help me locate the vehicle that I need to purchase. And let's say we come about that vehicle and I come up to the window and I see there's a sticker price of X. It seems to be that whenever I've experienced working with car dealers, that from the time that I see the sticker price of X, whatever that may be, to the time I actually sit down and talk with you, the finance guy, there's all sorts of deal making that goes back and forth behind the scenes. And it's rubbed me raw a couple of times. Are they really giving me the best deal off the bat? I'm imagining with technology now that dueling or that negotiating has kind of fallen a little bit lower. But how does someone not get trapped into negotiating with somebody? And that's one of the big complaints I hear. I don't want to negotiate with the sales guy at a car dealership.
Let me start off this way. Yes, you do.
Okay.
You do want to negotiate. What you don't want to do is negotiate from a position of weakness, and neither do we in the car business. The most important thing is transparency of all numbers. When you go into a car dealership, I'll give you a personal example. Years ago, my wife and I, we went in to purchase a vehicle or to look at purchasing a vehicle. The salesman came out after getting the numbers from his sales manager and showed me a payment on a piece of paper. No term, no rate, no price for the vehicle, just a payment written on a piece of paper, and said, okay, does that look agreeable to you? Well, being in the finance world, I was intellectually insulted. I mean, how do I know how much I'm paying for the car? You could be, for the lack of a better term, you could be taking me to the woodshed.
Right.
So I want to see all of the numbers. I know from a personal standpoint that that's frustrating. In our particular circumstances, and now in the world of Google, almost all dealerships are doing the same thing. We do what is called a menu. Bring it out to the customer. It has the sale price of the car. It has your trade listed on it, if there is a trade. It has the terms that are like an average finance terms. Like if you finance this with us, the average customer today is getting 5.9% interest. Some are getting 4%, some are getting 6%.
Right.
And this is what your payment would be if you went 72 months or 66 months or 60 months. That way you got every bit of information in front of you. Then you can negotiate the whole deal. The problem comes in when there are hidden numbers. And you can't negotiate the terms of an agreement whenever you don't see all of the numbers. And so that's one of the reasons we use the menu system for Rusty Wallace. But most dealers have gone to that because, quite frankly, Google has taken all the surprise out of selling a car. When somebody comes on the lot, they pretty much know all of this stuff today.
So whenever somebody comes out with this menu that you're talking about, what points can they negotiate, or what advice would you give to somebody that is going to purchase a car and you say, hey, you can negotiate and here's the points you want to negotiate on?
I think the first and most important thing is if whenever you're going to negotiate, go ahead and get all your cards on the table. If you're going to trade your car, go ahead and get that in the numbers. You don't want any surprises, so go ahead and get it in the numbers. And one of the things that I think that has been lost in the world today is that dealers don't have as much room on the sale price as they used to. What they have to do now is they're having to negotiate on your trade. So your trade value is as important as anything in the world. So when you come on the lot, go ahead and know everything that you're going to, if you're going to use a trade, that's fine. If you're going to finance, go ahead and let them know that up front. And if you already know what kind of credit score you have, that's beneficial because they're not going to come out and show you terms at 5.9 if you're an 800 Beacon score. They're going to come out and show you terms at 3.89 based off of a local bank or credit union's lowest rate, which currently that average lowest rate is about 3.89. So they're going to talk to you about closer terms when they know more information.
So that leads me to the question then, Clay. Let's say I do have a trade-in, and let's say I'm affluent enough that I have enough cash to pay cash for a car.
Yes.
And I've found the vehicle I like, and I know the price that I'm willing to pay. I know my trade-in value, and we come to the decision that ultimately that I wrestle with personally. I'm actually, like you and I were talking off air, I'm dealing with this on my mother right this very second. She's trying to buy a new car. She wants to buy a new car, and she's trying to decide, Justin, do I pay cash for the car? And I have reasons why that may or may not make sense for various folks. Do I actually get what people are saying is 0% interest rate? And is that truly 0% interest? Do I lease the car? I mean, there's a myriad of different ways that I could go in acquiring this vehicle. I know that's a very loaded question. I'm sorry to ask like 6 or 7 things together, but could we spend a little time dealing with each of those respective ideas and why one would want to choose maybe cash versus non-cash or payments versus a 0% interest versus a finance charge, lease versus purchase? Can we kind of talk through those?
We can, and it is actually one of the things that I think is more important in the world that we live in, and especially the world that you live in particular. You're in the investment world. For instance, let's just take the average individual who cannot pay cash for an entire car. Or let's say they can, and they could buy a $20,000 car and they could pay cash. Let's use that person. They're the average Joe. They make average income. They've got this money sitting to the side, and they could pay cash for the car. Today, if they've got 720 plus Beacon score, they can get a 3.89 at your local credit union. So if I had $20,000 and knowing what you do for a living, and I pay it on a car and save myself 3.89 interest rate, or give it to you and have you put it in a mutual fund, and I'm bringing 10 to 15% on those accounts, why in the world would I use my money to buy a car? I would let it work for financing for me. It's paying me to finance my car. I'm in essence using the bank's money in order to invest my own money. And that's what I do personally. Now, not everybody can do that. And quite frankly, honestly, investments are not always consistent. I'm not always going to get 13% out of that fund. I'm not always going to get 7% out of it. Sometimes I might get 1%. But over the last 5 years, I know I've gotten better than that. So I would just use the bank's money.
But let's say that I'm debt adverse, and let's say that, I'm retired. I live on a fixed income. I understand what I'm going to call arbitrage, or the spread that I can make in investments versus an interest rate. But
yes.
My God, Clay, I really hate debt, man. And I want to come in and just pay cash for the car. Will I get a better deal paying cash as opposed to financing it?
No. And back years ago, where this current day myth comes from a past truth. Years and years ago, about 20 to 25 years, when I first got into the finance business back in the 90s, dealers paid for financing. So they paid what is called a discount. So whenever they financed a $30,000 car, they paid 1% to the financial institute as a discount for doing the financing for you. So they paid $300 for that particular deal. So it cost them money to finance. So they would rather you pay cash.
Gotcha.
Today, like myself at our dealership, we get paid what is called a participation. So whenever you finance your car, a $30,000 car, the credit union is going to give us 1% of that particular deal in order to incentivize us to do the financing there on the dealership. It saves the bank money and personnel, and it also makes us money on the finance. Mm-hmm. So if we know that a customer is going to finance a car deal with us, then we have a little extra wiggle room simply because we know the bank is going to give us that little 1% participation for doing that loan for them. Years ago, that used to be true. And you know how something is. Once it's true, it's always true.
Right.
Everybody believes it to be a truism. But currently today, you do not get a break on the price of the vehicle by doing cash as opposed to finance.
That makes sense. So then that leads to the question then, is 0% really 0%? Let's say that there's a special going on at a dealership somewhere and it's 0% for 72 months or whatever it is, as long as you put X number of dollars down, with all the different nuances in that.
Right.
Is the car company just raising the prices somewhere else to offset that free car, so to speak?
No, but the answer to your question is 0 really 0. The answer is yes. Okay. And the answer is also no.
Of course.
It's a little more complicated. The manufacturers are extremely intelligent in their advertising. And what they do is they advertise the 0% because they know that some people just absolutely will dive in for 0%. But I knew you were going to ask me this question, so I actually got one of our cars and did an example of it simply so that I could give everybody a look at it, because this is something that you want to think about, because there are some twists to this of why you would want to do it.
Sweet.
If you buy a 2018 Kia Sorento from us, that's a $27,000 car. You can get 0% and be on 66 months, and you get no rebate. Your payment will be $457, and you're going to pay no finance charge. All right. If you finance that same car with me and you don't do the 0 financing, I'm going to give you a $2,500 rebate. So you're going to pay $2,500 less for the car. On 66 payments, you're going to pay 2.9% interest, though. Your finance charge is $2,335. Well, it doesn't take a financial wizard to figure out that you're still almost paying the same thing for the car. You're just doing it in finance.
Gotcha.
All right. So then let's take one where you finance it with a credit union and not with Kia. You're going to get even more rebates. You're going to get $3,250 in rebate. And you finance that car for 66 months. You're going to get a 3.84 is the current rate. You're going to pay $3,034 in finance charge. So you're paying almost the same thing in finance charge that you would have gotten in the rebate. So your payment on all three of those examples is $457, $454, and $454. You're paying the same thing.
Right.
However, the 0% comes into account whenever you think, I'm going to buy this car, I'm going to finance 0%, and I'm not going to pay it off early. Well, then that's the way you want to go. Okay. You want to keep the 0%. You don't want to pay any finance charge. If there's a chance that you may pay that off in half the time, the best route to go is to get the biggest rebate, because you're going to save money on your finance charge in the term, and you're still going to get the rebate. So you're going to save more money. So in all three of those examples, the one that makes the best sense for an individual who might pay their loan off first is to take the largest rebate and finance with the credit union or a bank, as opposed to going through the manufacturer. Every single manufacturer has figured this all out. It's really 6 of one and half dozen of the other, if you know what that term means.
Yeah. So basically, in those three scenarios that you just laid out, with very little variance in the payments, it ultimately ends up being the length of time that you're going to hold the vehicle.
That is correct.
Okay.
If you're going to finance for the entire term and keep the term, do the 0. If you're going to pay off early, well, then take the bigger rebate, because it gives you the immediate punch of lowering the price of the car, and, of course, the ability to save money in the long term over the reduced interest that you're going to pay.
And in that same spirit of that Kia that we're talking about, let's say I came in on a $27,000 car and I put down $27,000 cash. The only risk I would have in this scenario would be my opportunity cost on what I could have invested that $27,000 elsewhere.
No, not exactly. In the scenario that you're giving there, if you take it to the 10th degree, you're going to lose $3,250 worth of rebate. So you could have got the car for $3,250 more by just financing it. Go ahead and finance it and keep the loan open for 3 to 6 months and then pay it off, and you got the rebate. Plus, you didn't end up paying the finance charge for very long. So if you want to pay off with the cash, then do that. But I would tell people that, and of course, this is probably something you can Google anyway, dealers would prefer that you didn't pay it off within 90 days. There are certain things, they're called chargebacks, and
right.
Every industry has it. If a customer doesn't keep a loan open for a certain amount of time, there are penalties that fall back on the dealer. So you don't want to hurt your dealer by getting an additional discount. They're trying to help you to give the additional discount. And most finance managers at dealerships will tell you how to go ahead and, hey, just finance it for this 6 months, turn around and pay it off. And you're going to end up not only getting the $3,250 in rebates, but you're also going to save another $2,500 in presumed interest over the term.
So bottom line, whether or not I finance at 0% interest, whether or not I go in and use a credit union or dealer financing, it's like you said, 6 of one, half dozen of another. It's all about the same at the end of the day.
It really is about the same at the end of the day. It's your individual abilities beyond that determine whether you would want to go ahead and do the zero or you'd want to do the financing. I will say this, financing options, you go out and try to go to your bank and try to get your financing done. You can do that. However, most dealers deal with 15 to 20 lenders. So not everybody has 800 Beacon score.
Right.
Can't come in and get the very best terms at their local bank. But you go to a dealer and he's going to have some leverage with those lenders to be able to help you obtain really good financing. And then beyond that, that's going to be on you and your own personal habits financially.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
So years ago, I bought a vehicle, and I actually bought it new from a dealer, but I bought it through my business partner actually bought it. We didn't go through the dealership. We went through the bank because the bank gave us a simple interest rate loan. So it was like a $50,000 work truck, and it had a 4% simple interest rate. So I think we're going to pay like $2,000 in interest on the note total if you're on that simple interest term out. And we compared it, or at least my business partner compared it to what the auto dealer was offering. And they were offering a compounded rate, a little bit lower interest rate, granted, but it was a compound or almost an amortized style loan. So I'm asking the question with that back knowledge is, how are loans typically today? Are they a simple, are they a compounded rate, are they amortized? How do they typically deal with it?
Most of your, and I'm going to use the word and hope that it never comes back on me, but most of your reputable dealerships are simple interest and don't even do business with people who use what we would call pre-computed notes.
Gotcha.
If you're at a place and they tell you that all of their notes are pre-computed, you probably want to consider about whether you want to do business with them or not, because quite frankly, that means they're having to reach out beyond normal financial avenues in order to obtain financing for their clientele. We do not even have a bank that we use at Rusty Wallace, any of our Rusty Wallace locations, that is a pre-computed note. I would not do a pre-computed note. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a place for it and that there's not customers who may need that in the future. That's a different matter altogether. But simple interest is the only note you want. You want to make sure they don't have a prepayment penalty. And if at all possible, you want to make sure that they don't have any VSIs, which are back-end loaded application fees. Now, there are some very good lenders who use VSI or application fees, and I'm not totally against them. It's just there's so many out there that don't use them till you're not hamstringed to have to.
So for the most part, though, most lenders are using a simple interest. So that means that for my simple mind, if I'm buying a $10,000 car that has 5% interest on it, my total finance charge, no matter the term, is only going to be $500.
No, not exactly. All loans are amortized. You're paying interest on a daily basis. So simple interest is a daily basis interest rate. So you have a per diem. Every day there's a certain amount of interest that's charged. That's why if you pay extra money on a car note, your balance or your amount of interest is charged off of the current principal balance. So that's why you want a simple interest. Pre-compute is a note where it's a rule of 78s. Right. So let's say a 1-year note, you're trying to pay that off every month. You're going to have a certain amount of interest. The first month, you're going to have 12/78 of the interest of the total note will be charged in the first month on a 12 month, 11 the next month, 10 the next month. So they used to call that front end loaded interest.
Right.
That's not exactly an accurate term, but it does give the idea that you're paying more interest at the front than you are at the end. In a simple interest note, you are paying more interest at the top of the note, but it's because the balance is higher.
Right. Okay.
Not that you're paying a higher interest rate. You're just paying a higher amount because the principal is higher. So no, you wouldn't just pay 5% of the note as a interest over the term of the loan if it was a 1-year loan. That's not exactly accurate. However, that is what a lot of people think when it comes to car buying. I know that's why you said that, is because that's what a lot of people think. And it's not exactly accurate.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I bring that up, is because when I did buy this vehicle, that's exactly what happened because of the bank lending. I was a business owner and the bank had offered me a deal where my total interest payment was only going to be like 4% of $50,000. So I was only going to pay total $2,000 over the life of that.
That is a different type of, you were actually facilitated under a commercial loan is what that sounds like.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. I just wanted to make sure that we were using the same terms, because that's
Absolutely.
that's one of those frustrating points that people don't understand, that a car loan is, I'm going to use the word amortized, very similar to a house.
That is correct.
And that just like a mortgage on a house, if you want to hit it real hard, you do it the first year or 2 years and then back off and let the note ride with basic payments from that point forward.
Yes, you had a blog not too long ago, and I thought it was one of the best that you've done, and it was talking about when you should put extra money on a mortgage and talking about at the top of the note, because the higher the principal, of course, the more bang for your buck you get.
Right.
Then you've got to identify when you're going to use that money somewhere else when it's not giving you the bang for the buck on the mortgage. Same thing on a car.
Gotcha.
That's exactly right. Same thing on a car.
So I've got 2 more questions for you, Clay. The first question is, whenever I've been in finance meetings with clients as I go to help them purchase vehicles, inevitably there's add-ons. After we agree to the purchase price of the vehicle, the terms, then I get into these warranty questions. Do I want extended warranty? Do I want warranty for alien invasions? Do I want da-da-da-da? And the list goes on and on. What would you advise most people choose, and why?
This is actually what I do for a living on a daily basis. Whenever you are done with your process of picking your car, you've agreed to the terms, everything is acceptable to you, you're going to come back into my office and we're going to sit down and I'm going to go over the terms to make sure that everything they've told you is what I've been told and that I've got everything in front of me correctly. Right after that, I'm going to start asking you some questions to identify your particular needs, and then I'm going to give you another menu. And it has every option that is available through the lender that you're using in particular. And it gives you the ability to choose what is best fit for you and for your actual buying habits. For instance, if you trade a car every 5 years and you have a 5-year warranty from the manufacturer on that car, does it make any sense whatsoever for you to buy an extended service contract? The answer to that is no. You're going to trade every 5 years. You do not need to buy coverage beyond the manufacturer's warranty. All right. So people like me, my wife's last car, she kept 9 years. My last car, I kept for 14 years. So I keep my cars forever. I don't drive a whole lot over normal linkage, or linkage being your day-to-day activities. National average is about 15,000. I don't drive much over that. So for somebody like me who's going to keep the car long-term, and nowadays you're buying cars that have 30 and 40 computers on them and an endless number of sensors, it does then become advantageous to take advantage of a service contract, one that will take care of all of those items. Now, I will say this. There are different warranties out there, different service contracts to handle manufacturer failures. You need to be careful what you're getting. Make sure that it is one that's going to cover all of those computers and sensors and electronics, because I'm going to tell you, the reason we as manufacturers give you 100,000 and 200,000 of powertrain warranty is because that powertrain hasn't changed in 150 years of the way it functions. And we've got it pretty well down pat. We know it's not going to tear up.
Right.
The things that we are concerned about is the 2,700 other computers and electronic type things that are in a moving vehicle. If you know up front what your needs are, it's much easier for me to talk you through whether it makes sense for you in particular. One of the things that we run into all the time, and I think is important for people to know, is when you get in the finance office, one of the first things that I tell a customer, and I think it's important for them to know, is that all of these are options. These are things that you can take advantage of or not take advantage of. It is entirely up to you. Our job, quite frankly, is to make those available to you. If it makes sense for you, then provide that for you. And of course, you don't have to do anything. A lot of time I've heard people say, I thought I just had to do that. No, you don't have to do anything. Every decision is on you. Right. You get to make that decision. The only reason the finance manager there is, quite frankly, he's a salesman. I'm a salesman. Mm-hmm. My job is to make sure and take care of our customers best we can. And of course, to maximize profit for the dealership.
Right.
That is my job. We don't make apologies about trying to make a living. This is the world we live in. We have to keep the lights on.
Right.
And most people don't realize it, but you pay more profit on a sectional sofa at the furniture store than you do on a car nowadays. It's something that is options. You have to be ready to make those decisions for yourself.
Well, that leads me to my question. You know, we've been talking about buying a car here and the ways to buy it and why we may choose one option over another. You know, one of the things I want to address with your expertise is, when should I consider leasing a car? And before you answer it, just to let the listeners know, you know, I think of Tesla, they're basically driving around computers right now. So we have this term called exponential technologies, and it's way that, you know, the technologies are growing what we're dealing with today was not even in existence 2 years ago. And in 2 years from now, it's, we could theoretically have driverless cars here in East Tennessee. Heaven help us, but it could happen. So
I'd rather have some driverless cars the way some of these people drive.
Well, that's the truth. Most of them are from Mississippi that drive real bad. You realize?
Oh, there it comes.
No. But so when would somebody consider leasing versus buying? Is it a technology consideration? Is it a lifestyle consideration? When do we deal with that?
It's, of course, those and more. Let's just take, since you brought up the Tesla, I wouldn't buy a Tesla to save my life. Now, that's not a put down on the vehicle, but would I lease one? You bet I would.
Right.
And the reason is because it is outpacing its own technology. And in that company in particular, the vehicle that you're driving this year is going to be so outdated next year, it won't even be funny. And you're definitely going to want another one of those models in the third year.
Right.
So leasing makes a lot of sense. A person who buys a Tesla is a specific soul. Now let's take it down to blue collar America, your Hondas, your Kias, your Nissans, your Chevrolets, your Fords. All right. Now these are people that if you're going to keep a vehicle and you're going to trade it every 2 or 3 years, then leasing makes a whole lot of sense. If you're going to keep it 5 years, then you need to purchase cars. If you're going to keep them 10 years, of course, it's a no-brainer. You purchase a car. Then lifestyle. Some people just like driving a new car. It's really not about how often they trade. They just like having a new car. I really don't have an issue with that, especially since that's how I make my living. But leasing is a good option. And I'll give you a good example of a vehicle that we lease that is, quite frankly, if it was me personally, I would lease it instead of buying it. And that is our Cadenza. It is an amazing vehicle. Technology is astounding. It is incredibly comfortable. And you can lease that car cheaper than you can buy it. The lease options with Kia, the rebates and things of that sort that they put in place, the money options are so advantageous that it is better to lease it than it is to buy it. So there's some considerations whenever you're looking at something. Is lifestyle is one of the main ones. And then, of course, how often am I going to trade?
So, brother, we have covered a lot of details on this, on buying cars, how the industry works. One question that I always ask everybody, I'm going to ask the question, let you think about it for a second and come back and kind of wrap this program up. But the question I often ask our interviewees is, what is that one question that you wish customers would ask you? That's the question I want you to think about. And the reason why that's a big deal is because many times as us in business or those who are helping business owners, and that's who most of our listeners are, we are asked a numerous amount of questions that consumers think they should ask. And I'm asking you questions that I think I should ask you, but in the back of our minds of those of us who do this for a living, we're like, man, you're not asking the right questions. I wish you'd ask me this. What is that question that you wish your customer would walk in and ask you in this car buying experience?
If I had to pick one, I think that what is somewhat frustrating is when somebody gets through the entire process and they've never asked me one time how to know how much they can afford. It's very frustrating when somebody doesn't think about that until they're completely done with the entire process, and then they're trying to decide, can I afford this car or not? That's something that you really need to know before you show up on the lot. And if you don't know before you show up on the lot, I wish it was the first thing you said. Hey, Clay, can you tell me, I make $40,000 a year and I drive 12,000 miles a year and I'm going to keep this car forever. How much of a car can I afford? I have 2 children. Give me some information and let me help you with what you can actually afford. Now, having said that, I've had that conversation with people after they've already committed to a $600 car note. And that is not when you want to bring that up. However, being in the finance business for as long as I have, that is some information that I can help you come to an understanding of before you get through that process. And quite frankly, I can't answer that question for you, but I can give you information and find out information about your finances and let you make that determination yourself. A lot of people will come in and say, I'd like to have a $200 car payment. And my first question is so you want a cell phone? And they kind of stare at me like deer in the headlights for a minute. And I say, I would say that you probably pay that for your cell phone. So you really got to think about what you're wanting to spend for a car and where you need to be in your own personal budget. That is incredibly important. The reason that I think that having this podcast with you is important to me was that I think that more people are educated about these things before they walk in the door. It takes a lot of stress out of not only their experience, but our experience in trying to help them find the right car for them.
That makes a lot of sense to me, bud. Guys, those who are listening to this, Clay is, like I said, Clay's a personal friend, full disclosure here, but I trust him and he's honest. And that goes a long way, especially in the automobile industry, just like in the finance business, just like anybody else. You know, Clay didn't come on the show to try to gain customers. That's not the intent. He knows that. But I will say that if you're looking for somebody honest in the business who can help you, and if you're in the market for a Kia, that's the company he represents, then reach out to my buddy Clay. He's with Rusty Wallace Kia here in East Tennessee, and you can reach out and touch him directly. Clay, any other input you'd like to say before we sign off on this thing?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope everybody gets some helpful information out of this particular broadcast.
Well, and with that, guys, I'd like to thank you for joining me on the Financially Simple podcast. You know, as always, I'm going to put the show notes and links to today's podcast, anything we talked about. We gave a couple of stats. We're going to put those in the blog. You can find those on financiallysimple.com under the heading podcast. Hey, while you're on the blog, Clay had mentioned I didn't realize this, Clay's a subscriber to my newsletter. And every week, I'm releasing some tax tips. I'm putting some business planning tips. He mentioned a mortgage paydown strategy that I wrote out. Man, I do some of my best writing on these newsletters. And while you're on the blog, sign up for it. And if you like the show, hey, subscribe and share it with some other business owners. Like I say every week, life is hard. It is. Life is good, and life can be frustrating, but money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.